So there are two types of YouTubers. There is the true type of YouTuber who can script out a video and make a plan and shoot it and edit it, and it all comes together and it's this cohesive thing that turned out the way you'd expect. And then there's me, who realizes that a score I did a couple months ago is coming out this weekend, and I should probably make a video talking about it because the score is really cool and I think that you would find it interesting. So I open up the Cubase session and I turn all the cameras on and we're just going to see what happens. But I thought it would be really fun to walk through my score for L.S. Mark's original cartoon called Catching Up. I was asked to score this, like I said, a couple months ago, and he wanted a really sort of traditional kind of cartoony, almost Mickey Mousey score with like some jazz elements and things that I'm just really excited about. For those of you who don't know, I have scored with my friend Andrew a lot of the Aaron's Animals videos, and we kind of did that like animated jazz sort of vibe for those, and so I really love that style, and getting to do that in this context is just really fun and refreshing. I love doing like big cinematic epic music, but getting to do something a little bit different every once in a while that just stretches some different muscles is a lot of fun, and I was really proud of how this turned out. It's a really awesome show, and I think the music is really cool. So I thought it'd be interesting for you if we just walk through and I sort of explain some of the choices that we made and why we did what we did. And yeah, hopefully it'll be interesting to kind of hear it in this context. I will be showing the video here for you to see. This is not the final video. What I got brought on pretty late, so it actually is almost final, but you'll notice like there's these red borders, which is where I was supposed to put music. Sometimes there's like instructions on what they wanted the music to be on the screen, but I thought it would be interesting for you to actually see like what I was scoring to directly. Thankfully this time, I wasn't scoring to an animatic or something. It was actually finished. There's a couple things like there's no dialogue in some spots, but like usually I'm scoring something that does not look this good. So this was a real treat to actually have it feel like the finished product and be writing music to it. It's just a lot more inspiring. It's really fun. So yeah, that's what we'll be watching as we go, and I'll solo stuff and we'll just go through and we'll make it happen. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so from the very beginning, I was instructed that we really wanted it to be, like I said, more of a traditional cartoony score, like even specific instructions of like, make sure we accent the eye movements, or it's a very tactile approach to scoring where almost like the music and the sound design sort of bleed into each other. Like you have musical accents on finger movements and eye movements and all these things that normally might not be scored in more of a modern sort of context, but in this, like, we really wanted to sort of harken back to that very kind of golden age style of cartoon scoring, and which was, it's a lot of fun. It's a little daunting because it's not only usually with the scene you're just trying to find like a vibe that the scene can live inside of. So you still have to do that, but you also have to hit all of these like frame by frame minute little things, and just finding ways to create an overall vibe while still hitting all those little things. It's a challenge, but it's a lot of fun. So here's what I did at the beginning, and yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit. So like this, this is all just setting sort of the vibe. We're not really getting into that cartoony stuff yet, but then as it keeps going, you'll see what we did here.
Psst, hey.
So you see that like ba-da-bum, with the little finger just kind of playing accent onto that.
Psst, hey. Remember, Clay, I'm seeing you after school today.
Again, so just like finding ways to personify these movements musically. One of the really fun things that we got to do in this is we got to record some live clarinet. Which we knew that for Clay's character, which is this character right here, we really wanted to personify him with the clarinet. And so towards the end of the process, I was like, hey, I think if we actually did a live clarinet for this, it would like bring a lot of life. Versus, for Rob's character, it was a lot more like short, kind of plucky sounds like strings or other woodwinds, or I ended up using piano and xylophone for him a lot. Like if you look at all this stuff on his finger, like here's the xylophone. That sort of a thing. That sort of became his sound, but then we really wanted to like bring some life to Clay's character with the clarinet, and here's kind of the first introduction to his vibe with that.
See you after school.
So see, this is a really good example of what I was just talking about. So you kind of have two distinct musical elements here. You have this live clarinet, and that's sort of like Clay's personality and his, sort of vibe. And then you have in the piano and some plucky strings and the xylophone, you have behind him, and I'll isolate it for you, Rob's kind of bouncy, plucky personality. And one of the things Mark really, really, really wanted to do is like really accent things like perfectly. So if you listen to these strings, they're perfectly in step with his walking tempo. Step, 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 step. So little touches like that you in context, it's not as obvious, but it all sort of comes together and just gives this feeling of like these conflicting personalities with the sort of slow, like disinterested clarinet, and then like the energetic, plucky sounds. Here it is layered again together.
See you after school.
Also had a lot of fun with like these little clarinet effects. The clarinetist Will Vargas did an amazing job on this stuff, but like listen to these. Yeah, just that's what it feels like to get hit by food, right? And then his frustration with the little trills. I love that stuff. It's super fun, and that's the stuff that like a live player brings just so much energy and life to. Yeah, let's continue. So again, you can tell we're following things like frame by frame. We kind of go back to the sort of disinterested clarinet vibe here, but then again, strings, now low strings instead of the high plucky Rob strings, for Clay are perfectly in sync, kind of plodding with his footsteps. Boom, boom. And then, accenting all that, and like literally being almost like painting musically what's physically happening on screen. We have the plodding strings, dum, 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 and then as he falls down, the clarinet does a fall. So it's like physically imitating what's happening with the music, and it just creates this very cohesive, very cartoony experience, which it's a lot of fun. I think it totally works. We'll keep going. Again, we go back to Clay. We get like a kind of cool trombone thing for the bully. Back to Clay, so back to clarinet.
Hey, Clay.
Again, so we get Rob back, so we go back to his plucky. It is very like almost programmatic. It's very systematic. It's like here's Rob's instruments, here's Clay's instruments, and when we see them, we hear them. There's not a lot of like subtext in a score like this. It's very obvious and on the nose, but it just creates like a fun and kind of engaging score. I think it's a lot of fun to work in this context. So yeah, so we get Rob back. So now you're going to hear again some interweaving between Clay and Rob's sort of music. Again, so like if I just isolate these, you can kind of see exactly what I'm talking about. So like watch Clay and listen to the clarinet, and you'll see how it follows Clay. On his eyes. And then on the eye move back, We're just following that, and this was because I kind of wanted to allude to Clay in the side that Rob is looking at. That's why we hear that while Rob's looking. And then if I isolate the Rob stuff, you can kind of see how the music plays off of Rob's specific personality through the course of this scene. Again, in sync with his steps. So, like, you know, this is an example of, like, every time he comes into the screen, and I'll unmute the dialogue so you can hear this, we get Rob stabs.
Hey, don't forget about tonight! You know, thing.
That sort of thing. And then this next cue is probably, well, it's maybe not my favorite, but it's one of my favorite cues in the whole episode. And it's this, like, really kind of, like, subdued, sort of jazzy clarinet piece that I wrote for Clay. I mean, it's like kind of illustrates he's gonna come home, he's had a long day, he wants to unwind, and so we wanted something that just sort of was like, who is Clay when he's alone, when he's sort of like where he wants to be doing what he wants to do. And it's this sort of warm kind of like, you know, if you're an introvert, you understand going home and it's like, finally I'm alone, I can sit down, I can watch TV, I can just, you know, be myself. And so this is the music for Clay to be himself. And you kind of hear it like growing as he sits down on this couch and, you know, he smiles for the first time, and it's like everything's sort of going his way and the music sort of accents that. And then we get a knock on the door, which we don't actually hear in this version. But that I knew that it was happening right there, and you see him react to it. So you'll see how I kind of musically, how I kind of did that. So the instruction I was given over this was sort of for it to feel like the band was starting kind of tentatively, and then more instruments join in, and by the end it's like the band's like really about to get going, and then everything kind of falls apart. So to sort of break down how I did that, I mean, the first thing and the most important thing is this stunning clarinet solo played by Will Vargas. Kind of falls apart there at the end. And then just little accents. I'm really proud. I played guitar on this. This is my little parlor kind of flat wound string guitar with bass. You know, that sort of a vibe that kind of keeps going. We get some trombone in there. Starts getting going, and then by the time we get here, we get some drums finally for the first time. Yeah. And if you listen to the brass, I'm really proud of the brass here. Brass is like getting going, and then it all just falls apart. You know, it's a lot of fun. It's all these little effects and things. If you're curious where I got some of those, there's this. This is like my secret weapon. There's a free orchestral tools library called Rotary Horns, I believe. Where is it? Yeah, Rotary. Free big band horns. It's free. I use it constantly. It sounds so good. I mean, like, listen to this stuff. And then it has also like all these key switches. So that's like the staccatos. Has marcatos. Shortfalls, scoops, accents, shakes, you know, which is just like, it's so cool. And that's free. It sounds so good. There's also like a solo trumpet. I think that's what I used here from that library. And like sometimes, you know, you can't get exactly what you want, so I bounce it down to audio and I sort of combine two things and sort of just make it work, because it's like you're dealing with really like particular articulations, and so sometimes you have to kind of crossfade them together to get it to be like what a performer would do. And then East West has some really awesome stuff too from like the old brass libraries from them. This is the Here's some jazz trombone, plongeois. That's also from East West. This is also the jazz trombone from East West. You know, all that stuff. You just kind of put it together like a tapestry, and it ends up sounding a little bit like a live orchestra, which is a lot of fun. So, yeah, that's sort of where that goes. And then we get into Rob again. And this is sort of where he starts talking about, for the first time, this club that they're going to go to, which is what the whole episode is sort of about. And it, we wanted to do sort of like club music, but like very stereotypical club music. Like, what is club music to someone who doesn't actually know what a club is? That was sort of the vibe for this. So, yeah, I got these super, like, kind of cheesy drums. This is what I built out of some loops. You know, that sort of a thing, which is, you know, sounds like a club. And then on top of that, I actually think there's some real Juno 60 on here. Yep, there is. This is some real Juno 60, which was right here. It's currently being serviced, but this is the Juno I recorded. You know, that's like, doesn't get more 80s than that. And then some bass stuff from Diva. Here's that with the Juno. And so kind of all together, it sounds like this. Yeah, you know, and same thing, like in the same way that I was doing with the orchestral instruments earlier, with like the falls and the effects and kind of following the physical scene on the screen, I kind of did that same sort of fall thing with the Juno. I think what I did with that was I time stretched it down with like a tape algorithm, so it's like slowing down the tape kind of sound. And then yeah, so through the rest of the scene, this was like one of the most complicated ones to score actually, because what they wanted was, they wanted like every time Rob's on screen kind of pleading his case for going to the club, we get club music, and then when Clay reacts and says he doesn't want to go, we get Clay's sort of signature jazz sound. And so it's these two very different genres fighting with each other, and this is kind of how I ended up accomplishing that. I'll play it without the dialogue. You really should go watch the actual show. I mean, this would honestly probably be better to watch after you've watched the actual episode, because it's just a lot, you would understand the context a little bit better, but you know, I'm showing the music. So here's the music. This is sort of the two different genres kind of fighting against each other. So we start with club, jazz, club, back to jazz. You know, so it's like I did them in the same key, same tempo, just completely different genres. And so it doesn't sound jarring as much as it could. I was really proud of how this turned out. So yeah, just two completely different genres. And like there's a little bit of overlap, like I'll do a brass fall at the start of the club music, you know, that sort of a thing. Yeah, but I think it works really well. It's a lot of fun. Same thing, Crash kind of follows his reaction here. And then we get into this this might be my favorite. I don't know, I'm going to say that about a couple cues probably, but this is sort of Clay arguing with his mom, and I want to show you just the music alone because I think it's really fun. So it's this like growing kind of dissonant jazz thing in the background, growing in intensity and anger because Clay is just yelling at his mom here, who's telling him he should go to the club with Rob. And then we have Rob kind of ignorant of what's going on in the door behind him, and he like sees a little butterfly. So we have a little bit of Rob music that kind of plays within this, but really because what we're hearing in the scene is Clay yelling, it's really just a lot of Clay music, and I'm really proud of this cue. So here's what this sounds like. You know, that sort of a thing. And if I isolate the little like Rob moments here, you can sort of see how I like follow this little butterfly moment. I think I did some slide whistle too. Yeah, here's what that sounds like. Yeah, you know, just like following that, and that's sort of just in the background of this cue as a whole. But listen to this rippin' clarinet. you know, and it's kind of all the backbone of that is this jazz drum groove, which is just awesome. And then harmonically, it's sort of just like I'll play the bass and the piano together. It's kind of just a typical like walking down the bass, you know, that sort of a thing, and then and it kind of walks up chromatically. I'll show you the MIDI, but here's sort of what that sounds like. Yeah, so I love that kind of thing. I'm an absolute sucker for it. And I thought it came out really well. Here's that free orchestral tools library I was telling you about. Listen to these brass. For free? That's crazy, man. That's crazy, yeah. So, yeah, that all kind of comes together. And what else do I have going on here? Oh, I have some saxophones, finally. Also from that free orchestral tools library. This isn't an advertisement for them, but it's kind of turning into one. I use this over paid stuff. It just sounds so good. Listen to the sax. This is a bari sax on bottom and then a sax section on top. Yeah, so fat and awesome. I love it. Okay, and then this next cue, again, I promise I won't say this about everyone, is one of my favorites. And this is one of my favorites because they kind of asked for like a sort of main theme for the show, and they wanted it to be like a Sonic the Hedgehog kind of rock ska thing. So what I did was I just pumped up the tempo, got these drums going, you know, just 2000s punk, baby. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But that's sort of the base of what I did. Sometimes I like to I shape out a scene with drums just to sort of give an idea of like what it's gonna be, and then I compose on top of that. The next thing I would have added to that was probably the bass line. I'm really proud of this bass line. So here we go. So yeah, and you'll notice there's some automation here. Basically what I did is when it like goes down like it's the club, I made it sound like the whole thing was coming from like inside of a club sort of a vibe, which I thought was a fun little gimmick and they liked it. And then if I add some rhythm guitars on top of that, it sounds like this. And this is like the order I would have been writing this, is the way that I'm adding these things. And I, you know, recorded this stuff here in my studio, which is a lot of fun. I love any excuse I get to play guitar. And then I wrote a melody on top. And this is actually not necessarily the thing I normally do, but I actually wrote this melody on guitar. And I'll just solo the melody alone. I just feel like when you're writing certain genres, it's actually better to sort of write for the most idiomatic instrument for that genre. So since we were doing like a rock ska thing, I knew I wanted to be in guitar and horns, but I don't play horn, so I wrote it on guitar, and here's the melody I wrote. Which, you know, I think it's super fun. And then if you hear that with everything, including the horns on top of that, here's what it sounds like. And then for this next scene, we continue with the ska thing. It sounds like this. Same kind of thing, just following that movement on the screen as they step, 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 boom, we're there. Hitting all the changes, step, step, boom. You know, So even when I'm not doing the like jazz cartoon genre, I'm still following those kind of tropes of that. But yeah, I love that cue. I think it's a lot of fun. Okay, and then we get into where they're waiting to go on the bus, and they wanted to sort of like personify how long the line is, so it like kind of plotting, you know, everyone's waiting in line, and then we have this like up and down of the heights of the characters, and I kind of accented that with the music. It sounds like this. And then we get into Clay, so then we get some Clay jazz here. And it's really interesting, like all these little things. I mean, one of the things that used to be so daunting about this style of music to me is like harmonically, like what do you do? And so if you look at this, like if we look at the chords I did here, it's a C major to an F sharp major to a B major to a G minor kind of thing. Or no, sorry, a B flat major. So it's like, it's moving in thirds, major or minor thirds a lot of the times, or tritones, because when you do that kind of movement, like tritone movements, it just sounds like weird. You know, it doesn't really sound like it's in a key. I think that would be the progression that I did there. It's not really like anything, so it gives this like, I don't know, it sounds not like music so much as like an expression of what you're seeing. So kind of being keyless helps with that, and then you settle into keys for moments like this where we get back into like the jazz thing. Another beautiful clarinet solo. And then this is one, so like see, I get some instructions here. Maybe as each of them talk, their own associated instrumentation can start working off each other, weaving in and out. So I'm not the genius who came up with this sort of stuff. This is just direction that was given to me, and then I just try to translate it musically. So every time we see Clay, we get the Clay jazz, and every time we see Rob, we get Rob's little plucky instrument. So here's that scene. See, plucky on Rob. Back to Clay. Rob. Clay. Walking off, looking in. Clay's theme can sound a bit more worried, nervous here. See, so I'm getting these instructions, and then it says before turning cocky, confident. So he turns around and we get cocky, confident. Right? Rob stops him right on the grab. We get a hit. Rob plucks. And then watch, all his steps are accented. You know, so it's the same sort of stuff that we had at the beginning, the serious juxtaposition of these two personalities, which I think is like where the charm of this cartoon is. And so just trying to accent that with music to make it even more obvious than it is on screen is sort of what we're trying to do. So now Rob's gonna try to pay. Confident little Rob. Doesn't turn out the way he wants. And then that's the end of the music, kind of until the end of the show, because all in the middle is like diegetic club music. And then obviously stuff at the end. We'll go over there and we'll look at it. But yeah, so that's sort of the sort of guiding principle and the way that I'm thinking about this stuff as I'm making it. As we go in, there's like this one riser section, kind of a tension riser that happens here. I did that with some Labs trumpets, rising string glisses, a riser. Yeah, so I was really, really happy with that. And then we get this little bit as Clay is now inebriated and Rob is not too happy with him. And those are the girls they wanted to talk to. It's the same sort of thing, you know, just following each of their instrumentation as they talk. Scene progresses. This is sad Rob. And then happy Rob. And then it turns to sad Rob again. You know, the music's sort of like falling apart. And that kind of stuff, like, I don't play to tempo. Like, I just play them. You know, it just sounds like it's sort of falling apart. Sort of scene setting music, they're being really mean to him, so it's not like positive music. He hears something. He gets kind of angry at them growing. He comes in. So we get Clay's clarinet. They're kind of fighting. This growing tension as Rob is looking around. And then an explosion. So it's following exactly what we're seeing on screen, growing and making sure that we're matching what's going on pretty one-to-one. They kind of tell these girls off and they're really happy about it. So then we get their little music as they walk away. And then they kind of debrief the situation. So this is like Clay music, but it's it's less disinterested, it's less dark. It's a little more like sweet, but it's still on his clarinet with little interjections of Rob here and there. Here's some Rob music. And totally opposite. So Clay's now music is still the same instrumentation, but it's getting a little bit sweeter. And Rob's is the same instrumentation, but instead of being like as plucky and upbeat, it's a little bit sadder kind of plucky. Because once you've established these like tones and these instrumentations and themes, you can then play with them, which is a lot of fun. As the story progresses, we'll keep going. So sad kind of music as they're talking. But then Clay reassures him. He gets happy. Definitely the most like hopeful rendition of Clay's music. He tells him like, hey, you just stood up for yourself, like this should be happy. So then we get Rob's theme super distinctly, but in the context of Clay's jazz. So it's like it's Rob's music but over Clay's kind of setting, and this is sort of illustrating how like they've both kind of grown as characters, because we have Clay's kind of baseline and encouragement of Rob, but then Rob's like plucky, fun personality on top of that. Sort of like they've found a home with each other in a way that they're more like cohesive. They're like their friendship has grown over the course of this cartoon, and that sounds like this. It's a joke that happens there. But yeah, so you can kind of hear like we have the typical plucky stuff that we've had for Rob this whole time. It's just in a a much different context now. That could have been Rob music from the beginning, but then underneath that and sort of like the layer that's sitting on top of is very much like Clay music from the beginning, which sounds like this. So it all comes together in the end, and their two kind of musical worlds merge. We get a little Rob moment here as he thinks about taking a drip of the alcohol. He tries it, he doesn't like it, and then we get a big version of the ska theme to end. So anyway, yeah, that's my score for catching up. I hope that was as interesting for you to watch as it was for me to write. I'm really, really proud of it. The episode is out now. If you came here from there, thank you so much for watching and for supporting. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you have thoughts on what I did or could have done differently, go ahead and leave a comment. And if you didn't come here from that video and you want to actually watch the video for real, which you should absolutely do, I've linked the video below. So go to LS Mark's channel and you can watch the amazing cartoon there. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.